I'm going to move on because this really is about the next group of people that I'm about to introduce, and recruiting in the COVID-19 era. I'm going to speak to the panelists here throughout the next half hour or so, and then at the end we're going to have some time for some Q&A. First off, I'd like to introduce Mike Millian. And Mike, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? And go ahead, sorry.
Hey, thanks, Dirk. I want to thank Charlie and Kim and Jillian and the TransRep team for making me part of this panel today. My name is Mike Millian. I've been in the trucking industry for 30 years now. Started out as a driver when I was 18. Did that in different functions for about 8 years, and I went into a driver training school for the fleet I was working for, and was a trainer for 2 years full time. Then I became a fleet manager, first for a hire fleet and then a private fleet. And then in 2015, I became the president of the Private Water Truck Canada, where I still am today. And the PMTC is the only national association in Canada that represents private and dedicated fleets. We've been around since about 1977. So with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for being part of this panel today, and I'm sure all of us are looking forward to your contributions. Next, I'd like to introduce Geoff Topping. Geoff, would you take a few moments to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Dirk. Thanks to everyone at the National Recruiting and Retention Symposium for allowing me to be part of today. Thanks to David for your talk earlier, David. And just thanks to everybody in the industry for all you've done in this times of COVID. And to David's point, we're finally being recognized for the services we provide to the economy and to all of our citizens in North America. And just a big thanks to everybody for all they've done. I'm the Vice President of People and Culture here at Challenger Motor Freight. Challenger is a privately owned trucking company, trucking and logistics company based, our head office is in Cambridge, Ontario. We have facilities in Quebec, BC, and some logistics offices in the US. And it's just our pleasure to be here today and be a part of this.
Thank you, Geoff. We look forward to hearing your insights as well. Next, I'd like to introduce Bart Kanters. Bart, please, would you take a few moments and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you very much, Dirk. My name is Bart Kanters. I'm the president of the Ready Mix Concrete Association. We were formed in 1959 to represent the ready mix concrete producers. Our members have about 270 concrete plants. We're a local construction industry, so we've got 3,500 certified trucks. Basically, SPIF 22s or tandem tandems is basically what we have out there. Primarily DZ drivers that our industry uses, and again, because we're local, we're not traveling any more than 60 to 100 kilometers from the plant. But that's the concrete industry.
Thank you, Bart. Just a quick note to the panelists. We're going to be going through a series of questions, and I will ask some of the questions will go to all of you, and some of them will go to individuals. But I will call you up, and just a quick reminder to try to keep your time to about a minute and a half for each of the questions. Again, we're talking about recruiting in the COVID-19 era, and to all of you, and I'm going to start with Mike, but to all of you, what type of employee member screening protocols are your members and staff currently practicing?
Thanks, Dirk. So as our membership is broad-based, and it not only involves trucking companies, because we're private fleets in a lot of cases, they also have warehouses, manufacturing plants, retail. The protocols they have in place are pretty broad-based and sector-specific. But you know, some of the things they all do, I would say at minimum, all members are completing the COVID-19 questionnaires for anyone who enters their premises. Those questionnaires are a little bit different depending on what province or territory you're in. They all have slightly different protocols. Some are doing temperature checks when people enter their facilities, using that as a screening tool. Employees, after they complete a form originally, they must self-monitor and are requested to report if they're feeling symptoms, and then not come home or not come into work in a lot of cases. And then some of our companies are going to the extreme on a good sense that they are telling their drivers, they come in contact with someone who has symptoms. So not even if the person hasn't tested, just if they have symptoms. If they come in contact with someone who has symptoms, they are actually asking their drivers to self-isolate, go get a test, and wait for those results to come back before they return to their driving job. And so the drivers will do that. They are paying them when they are sitting. Yes, so that's an example of a member who's gone, I think, to the next level, and they're a company that is working in a fairly sensitive environment. So I think they're making sure their drivers are reporting and not spreading the disease, which is why they're going to that level and then paying them when they sit.
Thank you, Mike. And it is interesting to hear that there are so many different proactive ways companies that your members are taking in this time. Bart, I'm going to go to you with the same question. What type of member screening protocols are your members and staff currently practicing?
Great. Yeah, very similar. Obviously, we're following provincial protocols when it comes to daily screening of employees. The ready-mix industry is really two components. We're manufacturing a product that has a 2-hour shelf life. So we start off with plastic concrete and we got to get it out to the job site. But the bigger portion of our workforce is really the delivery vehicles and the drivers that get it out there every day. So daily reporting, temperature checks that are being done at the company. Because we work on construction sites, we often get into double screening. So again, it still hasn't standardized in the industry, but when we make deliveries to larger projects, it's fairly common for general contractors to implement a second screening process for people that access the actual construction work sites as well. So we see issues there. And another verification. But again, I have to point out, we do sit on WSIB committees, and last month there was 4,500 COVID-19 claims, and only 20 of those were in the construction sector. So we're very fortunate in the trucking and construction industries to have the ability to protect workers. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Bart. Very informative. And again, the challenges that I think all of us face in the industry, whether part of it being reporting to the actual office and then going to various sites. And I think the communication between shippers, or in your case, construction, is paramount to make sure that the well-being of everyone is being taken into account. Geoff, finally, Challenger, what type of employee screening protocols are your staff practicing?
So a lot of the same things that were talked about earlier. I mean, obviously, a lot of our shippers and receivers are also doing screening, so it is duplicated. We chose to go the route of an app on a smartphone for all of the non-driving staff, and they fill that in every day before they enter the workplace. It gives them a green or a red flag, and then my team and I are notified of anybody that goes red who might be experiencing symptoms or have someone at home who's ill, and we take the proper steps through our policies after that. All drivers and owner operators are either filling in a paper screen when they get to the office, or they have the ability to do that on a Survey Monkey, and we'll soon have the ability to do that via our satellite system on the Isaac units. We also have screening at all the facilities for anybody entering. The app we use, you can actually send a pre-notification to a guest. So if Dirk was coming to our facility, I could send notification to Dirk. He could do the screen before he arrived, and he could show that he's green when he arrives. So we're trying to take all the precautions we can. As everybody knows on the line and on the call, things change daily almost in the rules and regulations, and we're just trying to keep everybody really communicate and keep everyone safe at the same time.
Thank you, Geoff. I would think everyone would agree that over the years we've had to be quite agile in our industry, but I don't think anything prepared us with our backgrounds to what we're dealing with today. So that brings me to the next question I have for the panelists, which will be to all of you, is how is your business or members' businesses being impacted by the COVID-19 global pandemic? Have you seen any increase or decrease in recruitment and overall business? And are you seeing changes now as a result of the second wave of the COVID-19 cases? Bart, why don't we start with you on this one?
Okay, well, obviously the elephant in the room, tracking drivers is a critical issue for our industry. When it comes to construction and concrete in particular, there was a drop off in March and April, probably about 30%. But since May and definitely by June, demand has gone through the roof. Construction is just booming. We're at the point right now where we're having shortages of raw materials and can't supply as much concrete as people actually want to buy. So I guess if you're going to have a problem, that's a good problem to have. But it is putting a lot of stress on making deliveries because, as I said, ready-mix concrete, it's a 2-hour window to once you mix the ingredients to get it out to the job site. So really what we're seeing with the second wave is really a strong focus on safety protocols. So we've worked with a lot of allied industries and associations in improving protocols, and safety has been a critical issue. But really, I guess the challenge for everyone now is complacency, unfortunately. Like we're 6 or 7 months into this and we're all getting a little sick of it, to be frank. And so I think the real challenge for industries is to really empower employees to be consistent, remember why we're doing this. We've had really good results. We need to continue on with that and try and avoid the need to tighten down on facilities. Again, in the presentation that was talked about before, when people can't even use the bathroom at facilities, that's a critical issue. But as we get into the second wave, there's going to be more isolationism, I guess is the term, and we need to work together. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Bart. Mike, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, so I mean, instead of saying this at the start of every question, I think we can just infer it, but you know, my responses are based for all my member companies, so they're going to be very varied compared, you know, depending on the type of business. So at the start of this, how it affected them, it really depended on what type of business they were in, because we all had to sit at home and be isolated. You know, we have members, Molson Coors, Labatt's, they went through the roof. They couldn't keep up because we were all sitting at home getting drunk. Right? We didn't have to drive anywhere, so I think their needs went up.
Drinking in moderation.
Yeah. Then we have grocery stores, pharmaceutical companies in our membership, the ones that supply medical gas, blood services. They couldn't keep up. They couldn't find enough drivers at the start of the pandemic. Then we had others in our membership base who were almost all automotive based who were completely shut down. So we had some, it was a boon to their business, and some it was obviously very challenging. Getting PPE supplies, I think, was a challenge for everybody. Whether you were a trucking company, a grocery store, or whatever else. They had challenges with that we were able to thankfully help the partnership of our governments. And you mentioned bathrooms, that was an issue, not only in shippers and receivers, but I mean, truck stops and rest areas and stuff. So thankfully, governments again got on board and helped us out with that. As things have started to come back up, some of the issues we're seeing, Bart touched on it, was attracting drivers again. At the start, drivers were getting laid off. Attracting drivers was very challenging for our cross-border members because of what we've seen down there. I think, you know, things aren't quite as controlled down there as they are here. And the average age of drivers over 50. So some of those drivers that got laid off didn't want to come back. They were scared of getting the virus in the States. So that became an issue, trying to attract new drivers as things ramped up, and not all the ones that are laid off have yet to return. And, you know, just cash flow was a big issue. 60-day and 90-day payment terms went out to 180. Trying to get money in was an issue, but you still got to put money out. And increased costs because of all the PPE supplies and protocols that had to be taken. And that they had to be taken. We all know that, so you do them. But that increased costs at the same time as revenues and payment terms were declining. It's certainly quite a challenge. And now we're seeing members who are having issues getting their driver's tested. The member I mentioned to you that isolates their drivers until they can get tested. Well, now with the increase in testing, it's now becoming a problem, not just in Ontario and Quebec, but now it's becoming an issue right across the country, where I think we're up to 4 or 5 provinces now who have said, don't test unless you have symptoms. And then we're trying to get drivers out there to get tested and reduce the spread, and they're having a hard time getting it.
Thank you, Mike. Geoff, has Challenger seen an increase or decrease in recruitment and overall business?
Overall business has been pretty good. At the beginning, obviously, when everything shut down, at first it was really busy. Food shipments went through the roof. Consumable items obviously went through the roof. When the automotive shutdown happened, we did have to lay some drivers off. There's no doubt about that. They're all back working, and more have been hired for that operation as well. Now I would say we could use a few more drivers. We're overbooked every day out of all regions. Volumes are good. Recruiting's a little slower. Seeing less people interested in going to the U.S. Lots of opportunity, or lots of people applying for local jobs or Canada only, but not a lot of people that want to cross into the U.S. That's been a bit of an issue. We haven't had too much trouble with our existing fleet of going to the U.S. We have had some drivers that have some pre-existing medical conditions that have asked to, only go to portions of the U.S. or just make a quick trip in and back. And we've worked with everybody as best we can in those scenarios. And I think that's the key to it right now. Is everybody, to David's point earlier, is stressed. Everybody has worries about their family, about the economy, about what's going to happen next, and just try to. I know I've said this a lot, and I'm going to continue to say it, is try to communicate with people as best you can, keep them safe, keep them informed, and work with them as you can.
Thank you very much, Geoff. Geoff, the actual next question flows into you specifically. And have you had to implement anything new in the recruiting practices as a result of COVID-19? And what's the biggest change of your recruiting in the result of COVID-19?
The biggest thing is we're doing a lot of video interviews on Teams or Zoom or things like that. When a new candidate does come to the facility, we do have them fill in a health screen. We do a temperature check at that point because it is somebody coming into the facility. Obviously, we have plexiglass, sneeze guards, things like that between the recruiter and the applicant. It's made it a little less personal, unfortunately, and I think people understand that because it is for everyone's safety, but we have taken all those precautions. I think it's a difficult time for everybody. It has hindered, that slowed down the process a little bit, getting, everybody's busy. So getting things like references, getting, references, documents, all those kind of things is a slower process right now with everybody scaled back and under a lot of stress. But those would be the biggest things. And I think the big thing is we as an industry, we all need drivers right now, and that ebbs and flows as we all know. And right now it's a big issue. I think it will kind of settle down a little bit. We're in a bit of a peak time right now. That's always a bit of a peak. The construction industry is trying to get a whole bunch of things done before the winter sets in. The holiday rush has started, and it's just a busy time for everybody.
I would concur on the busy time. Again, with TruckRight, we have some analytics on the kind of the flows, and we definitely saw the downturn hard and fast across our clients back at the beginning of COVID. But I would agree with you, Geoff, without any private information, but we have seen a huge uptick over the last 2.5 weeks in the recruiting efforts of our clients. It is obvious, again, seasonally, like you said, this is a time of year, but it's unbelievably busy right now from what we're seeing with our clients, which is fantastic. Bart, question to you, sir. Have your members considered using clear plastic dividers in the vehicles when conducting road evaluations as part of the recruiting process? Or is there anything else with PPE that you're implementing as part of the recruiting process, your members? I believe you're on mute still, Bart.
There you go. Okay, back in the spring, again, ready mix and construction's a seasonal industry. We still produce concrete all year round, but the months of January, February, and March in Ontario are the coldest, and that's the lowest production. So we tend to bring a lot of drivers back on in April. So when we first encountered this, again, we have a safety committee. We had very active members. We partnered with the truck TSSAO as well and ISHA to look at what we could try and do for mentoring in cab. We had a number of members that started off by putting rigid plexiglass, and then they moved to 10 mil plastic, which I basically call a tablecloth covering that you'd have on your kitchen table or dining room table at your grandparents' house, and looked at those methods. So we had a number of members sharing ideas on what they could do. Some of the concerns that came up really related to possible glare and distractions with either plastic or rigid plexiglass in there. There was concerns about possible impacts with the driver in the event of a rollover, so some safety concerns were raised. And then we got down to the fundamental issue of what is it there for? And again, at the start, no one really knew what the clear transfer mechanism was. So again, we were asking ourselves, is it there as a, I think you called it a sneeze guard, I would have said spit shield before, but what's its real purpose? And because you had a constant ventilation system and you're trying to separate two people on either side of the truck, there was really concerns raised with whether it was going to be effective or not. So in the end, we had a number of people do trials, but then by working with different companies, talking about the safety aspects, getting a lot of feedback from the drivers themselves, in the end, we went to basically face shields, face coverings, and decontamination procedures as ways to protect both the driver and the mentor who's in the passenger seat.
Thank you. My wife and I were in Toronto not too long ago, and we took an Uber from the hotel going for dinner, and the Uber had a plexiglass wall in between. It kind of reminded me of being in the backseat of a police car. Not that I've done that before, but you've got that 2-inch space all the way around, and then again the air conditioning of that vehicle. We didn't take our masks off. The driver told us that we could, but so it sounds like your members, drivers who are having that similar sort of evaluation. What's the purpose of this of the plexiglass?
Yeah, people were looking at duct taping and clear plastic tape to try and completely seal off the airflow. But when you got a ventilation system that's not separated, again, it kind of defeats the purpose. Really, the drivers felt it was false security, and the safety people felt the same way at the end of the day.
Mike, we're running down to about 4.5 minutes till the end of this session before we go to Q&A. Can you briefly give us some of your member recommendations on best practices when two employees need to be in the same vehicle at the same time?
Not sure that I've ever done anything briefly, Dirk, but I'll give it a whirl. And I mean, we all work together. We use I sit on the TTSAO board as well, so we use the TTSAO Concrete Ontario and IHSA document. We got some help from recommendations that our private fleet partners down in the south do, and all the trucking associations work together with Transport Canada, and we developed guidelines for best practices for drivers. A lot of those were used. Obviously, like anything else, both drivers have to complete a COVID-19 assessment before they enter the cab. If they're symptomatic, they're sent home for the day, isolate and self-monitor. They do temp screening. Both drivers have to put a mask on before they enter the cab. Must disinfect hands prior to touching anything in the cab. Cab cleaned with disinfectant wipes at every stop when they re-enter the cab. Stay as far apart as possible. Obviously, you're a little limited on how far apart you go. We don't want you hanging out the window. And they have to wear gloves when they're outside the cab and remove those gloves before they re-enter the cab. And then a lot of companies are obviously, I think pretty much all now, are now doing extra vigilant on the disinfectant and cleaning of that cabs at the end of every shift before the next shift starts.
Thank you. For the next segment, I'm actually going to combine a couple of questions into one and give each of you some time on it. And really, if you could give all the companies listening and watching today a piece of advice or one piece of advice, something that they could be doing better or something to support the recruiting process because of COVID-19, what would it be? And again, maybe take an additional moment. Is anything else you may want to share outside of that scope? And why don't we start with Geoff, please?
Yeah, thanks, Dirk. I think one of the biggest things we can all do is to take care of the people that we already have in our fleets and in our organizations. They are the best recruiting tool we have. You know, they'll tell people how they're being treated, how they're being looked after. Like David was talking about earlier, when you get calls from a driver saying a shipper won't let them use the washroom or come inside, make the call to that shipper, make the call to the trucking association. We all need to work together in that area and act as one. We are the custodians of the industry, all of us, and we need to make sure we continue to be that. Communication has been a number one thing. We are on, I do a COVID communication, it's called, and I think this week will be number 60. So it gives you an idea of how many we've done since we've started. We started them out as daily, have backed them down to bi-weekly, and with additional ones at times as needed. Whenever a big change comes up, we communicate to the drivers and the entire organization. As far as when you're in the recruiting phase, just make that applicant or recruit feel as safe as possible when they come to your facility. Make sure there's hand sanitizer, make sure there's masks, make sure there's face shields, make sure they fill out the screen or the paper survey, however it is you want to do it. Just show everybody that you're doing what you can to protect people in this time.
Thank you very much, Geoff. Again, and the time is a bit of an issue for us. I'd like to, Mike, again, if you just keep it a little brief. I have the Trump mute button here that I might have to use.
We're going to see that a lot tonight on a certain debate. We might see used a lot. So, I think companies, it's kind of building on what Geoff said, you know, advertise all the steps you are currently taking to protect your workers that go above and beyond just government protocol. You know, your drivers, people that work for you, will probably do that for you if you're doing it properly. So if you're going above and beyond to make sure that you're keeping your workers protected, safe, and healthy, I think that's a great recruiting tool. Those people that you care, and it costs more money and it costs more time, but it really can't be about money. It has to be about doing what's right in the long run. It's going to keep the drivers that you have there and help you.
I think that speaks back to David Henry's talk a little bit earlier, is just care, communicate, and the culture will shine through. Bart, we're going to say the closing remarks now to you. Anything you'd like to add or answer to that question?
Yeah, I think some of our members have had a lot of success with social media, actually, and doing those short little 30 to 60 second day in the life videos. So having actual drivers talk about what it's like to be a ready-mix driver for an individual member company. Again, that seems to be relatable. It gives people a feel for what the industry's like. Again, as I said, ready-mix concrete's a little different in that you're not just a driver, you're also a concrete technician. You can change the properties of the final product. You're dealing quite a bit with the customer on the job site, on the construction site. So there's other components, and hopefully there's a sense of accomplishment when you see you're building these major projects that are in your local community, and you've got the ability to be home every night. So again, social media is probably the biggest area that we're dropping the ball on. We need to do better on.
Thank you very much, Bart. I'd just like to quickly thank the three of you for participating. I think I'm going to be handing this over to Charlie for the Q&A portion, but I just wanted to bring to attention that we'd actually sent some of our marketing people out to the truck stops recently and did some during Driver Appreciation Week. We kind of focused on how drivers perceive this hero topic, and they were all very humble, didn't see themselves as heroes, doing their job, and just really happy that the general public and some government officials are actually recognizing their efforts. And again, I thank you, everybody. And Charlie, I'm going to let you take over for the Q&A unless there's anything else you'd like me to help with.
Fantastic. Thank you very much to the entire panel, and Dirk for moderating and adding your comments in there and your experience and expertise into what our panelists were saying. But we do have some questions coming in. I do encourage people to put more questions in. We do have about 7 minutes of Q&A time right now to get through, but you know, we'll do what we can. Any questions that I mentioned before that are not answered, we will make sure we'll put out in a follow-up document. So I'm going to start with Bart. One came through for you in regards to Concrete Ontario and the driver shortage, something I know that we've heard a lot about over the last little while. Do you see this, or do your members see this as a short or a long-term issue that needs to be tackled?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the comment was made earlier about demographics and the age of our workforce. We're in that same boat as everyone else. Our average driver age is 55, and average age of tenure is 20 years. So again, we're fortunate to have a very stable workforce when it comes to making concrete deliveries, but again, we're getting up to that age, and attracting new young people to the job is definitely one of the bigger challenges that we have. And then we get into things like insurance. I won't get off on that topic. Again, trying to get young drivers the necessary work experience to satisfy insurance companies is another big challenge that we're facing. So definitely it's a long-term issue that we have to address in our industry.
Yeah, I think we could probably spend the better part of the 2-hour symposium today talking insurance if you wanted to go down that road, but we'll save that topic for another day. Okay. So I'll throw this one over to Geoff. Some of the best ways right now that you're finding for communication to staff and drivers during times of COVID. So I guess the question there being, what are some of the best practices you're using? What is challenge you're doing right now to make sure that everybody's kept in the loop and you communicate with your staff?
Okay, thanks. So when we talked, I spoke earlier about our COVID communications, and when they go out, that goes out as an email to everybody that has a Challenger email address from myself. It also goes in the loop, which is a weekly newsletter that we do here at Challenger. It's then emailed to every mechanic and every driver and owner operator, because we have their personal email addresses. And then finally, we put it out over the Isaac instrument so that everybody can see it who's in the truck. And that message obviously hits a lot of people. I then have copies of it printed and left around the facilities for people to pick up. We get a lot of questions back out of it. I'm surprised how fast sometimes the questions come back, the comments about could you address this on the next one. I make sure I address every one of those personally back to the person, and if I can't get them the answer, if I don't know the answer, I get them the answer. And it's really worked well to have that as a two-way communication. People are nervous, people are anxious, and they need to know information.
Thank you. No, it sounds like you guys are doing a fantastic job with that. Thank you for sharing. One for Mike here. Mike, because it says here many of your PMTC carrier members stay within Canada, and I know you mentioned a couple of examples, specifically the beer ones that were very busy at one point. Has COVID affected driver turnover, and in your opinion, why or why not?
I would say for the most part, from what I'm hearing from my members, no. They've still been very good that way with turnover. Keep in mind, we do have members across the border, but I would say 80% of our member fleet stay within Canada. On the benchmarking surveys we send out every year, the turnover rate in our private fleets is generally around 10%. So it was always low in the first place. And the biggest issue for their turnover in a lot of cases is retirement. So the controllable turnover is digits. Yeah, I think a lot of it just has to do with the type of business they're in. They are generally home every night for the most part. It's regional, paid by the hour, that sort of thing. So it hasn't really had much of an effect. Like those companies that got busier where it became an issue, the turnover wasn't an issue. Trying to get enough drivers in to be able to do what they needed to do when we were at the heat of the pandemic was where the issue came.
Okay, no, thank you. And I've got one other question here. It's not directed at anybody in particular, so I want to throw this out, being conscious that we have probably about 2.5 minutes left. So I'll open it up to the panel, but it's a big one. The challenges of COVID were immense on the entire country, including the trucking industry. Is there anything that you would take from COVID that we can use to finally crack, and I'm quoting here, the nut of trying to recruit young people into our industry. So again, being conscious of time, Geoff, you're just kind of first on my on the cameras here, so I'll go to you first. Any thoughts on that?
Well, interestingly enough, we have seen an uptick in younger applicants to our school, to our driver training school, which is good. I think a lot of the media attention we got from, like we as an industry got from governments, from large companies, from news outlets, I think showed many younger people that this is a viable industry, a place where they can have a good career. And I think we are seeing an uptick in the younger people applying to the school. Whether those people will all end up at Challenger, not likely. I mean, our school does help get you your license, but you know, they may end up wanting to haul concrete. They may want to end up working for one of Mike's association members, and that's okay because it is getting younger people in.
Yeah, great, and congratulations on all the great work that the Academy is doing. Well, thank you. Bart, any thoughts on the younger generation?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, quite frankly, for them. Again, great paying jobs, good benefits. It's not something that's pushed enough at the high school level when it comes to opportunities. So anything that we can do to encourage that is definitely a great opportunity. You can go from a minimum wage job to $30 plus an hour in our industry. Again, the challenges we have a little bit, we have members that have 5 drivers and members that have 500. So again, our smaller drivers, the challenge, it's an insurance challenge on bringing in young people, and that's something we have to work on as an industry.
Thank you. And Mike.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, Bart touched on it. Getting to our youth has always been difficult, and this isn't just this is a societal issue, right? Us as parents are to blame, the school system's to blame, governments have been to blame. For years, we made people that wanted to work with their hands feel like they were stupid. But you don't want to go to college or university, what's wrong with you? Now we finally have an opportunity with the bright light that's come out of COVID, is people have saw how essential truck drivers are, and they've been praised from everybody to world and government leaders. And now people see that they kept working while this pandemic was going on. Well, maybe their parents were out of work, their brothers. So I think it's helped, and we have to use the opportunity, because the key to getting in front of kids at a high school system, you have to get in the discussion at the dinner table first. And I think we're now in the discussion at the dinner table. And if the kids are interested and the parents know about it, that gives us an opening to get into the school. When the pandemic ends and we're actually allowed to get into a school, we have to use it, because if we let it slip away in 6 months or 12 months, it'll be gone. We have to season the opportunity. We have to start getting to the guidance counselors. Got to get in there. This is the best opportunity we've seen in my lifetime to get into the school system, and it's back out. We better not let it go.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing, and I think you're all right. The love and admiration that we're seeing in the industry right now is fantastic from that perspective. I think we can all say we hope that continues. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time today to share your knowledge, your expertise. That was a fantastic panel. Dirk, I know you're off camera right now, but thank you very much for moderating. There were other questions that came in. I will be sharing them with you after, so hopefully we'll get that taken care of in the next couple of weeks, and we'll get that out to all of the delegates today. So thank you very much for all that you do, and for being part of the panel today. Appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Thank you.